really got you into music?
Who got me into music?
Mm-hmm.
Anyone in particular? Anybody I knew? I didn't know anyone that played music, so
Well,
I didn't.
like a musician or anything.
Musician, I would think that I really wanted to play music because I liked their music. I suppose would have been probably like when I was a kid, probably like Elvis, early Elvis, like 1955, like all the Sun records. I really just started listening to stuff from that era when I was a kid, and that was in the 70s. So a lot of kids weren't listening to that, and a lot of kids were into the big arena rock stuff that I didn't like. I kind of related more to that. And then eventually, once rock and roll history changed after the disco era, turned into punk rock, that was more, it was a lot closer to the stuff I loved, you know, as far as the old three-chord rock that was just very back to rock and roll again. And that's what punk rock to me was, and that's why I got into that towards the end of the 70s and into the 80s, and it eventually turned into what everything else turns into, which is pop garbage that turns into, like, you know, everybody wants to copy it because it's making money, so it eventually turned into new wave, and then I had all the 80s bands that MTV happened, and it was just changed that whole thing. So when people talk about a real punk rock band, they're emulating their heroes from the 70s mostly, but the stuff that you have now isn't really, it has to change where people can feel the same energy, you know? Even now it's too saturated with bands that are somewhat, in their mind playing punk rock or rock and roll, and it doesn't really register as something that's legitimate or true, because I remember when it was true, because that was the challenge to those kids. They were playing it when they had more critics at that time, because nobody's heard it,
Right.
Even though it was the same stuff that happened in the 50s with the teenagers with rock and roll, and that's early rock and roll. I mean, rhythm and blues, the black music that there was going on, nobody was able to listen to that. White kids weren't able to listen to that, so they had.
Okay, that's going into bloopers.
But yeah, that was a choice the kids made, and they were facing that criticism then too. And that's every generation, really. I mean, before I'm sure there was other things, swing music and that sort of thing. But every generation had that. But it wasn't until, and I think I even knew back then that the combination of certain things had to happen for something to change, and that, in one word, was Elvis in the 50s, because he took all that without really thinking about it. He put it all together, and he wasn't a songwriter, he was a performer, and so when he had the guts to do that on stage, of course he got a lot of criticism, and he made a big stir, but eventually it was like there were too many people that loved him, and so it became, he became a household word in a year, and so every musician wanted to be like him. And so that was when real rock and roll, in its what it is now, what it is as far as everything that was done or is being done, was all because that guy broke down the doors. It wasn't because he was a great musician or a great artist or singer. It was the fact that he was white, playing black music, had the look. He basically created the look, and every kid at the time wanted to look like him. They started greasing their hair, growing sideburns, and moving like he did, and wearing the clothes he did, because that's what they wanted to be. They see this image of a white kid doing it. It was cool. Whereas, a lot of black musicians at the time never got the credit, which, they really couldn't get the credit because they weren't playing for the masses. They weren't playing for white America, and Elvis was for the white teenagers. But he was using that genre, the medium of being a rhythm and blues song. So he learned all his moves from watching, performers when he was a kid, black performers. So it wasn't anything new for him. And so, I mean, music, that's what I love about music, is that when things change like that, who did it? I always go back, if I love somebody, like somebody that I'm really enjoying as far as their music, and then I have to go back and find out what their influences were. And then you learn more about music history, you find out who they were listening to, what got them going on things, and then you go back and you go, oh, that's why he sounds like this. And I like this stuff, but I like what he did to it. Now what do I do to it? So it's just like art. You take whatever's not nailed down, and then you use it and make it your own. Because nobody's really coming up with an original idea. It's just a matter of mixing it all up and combining them, and it sounds sounds to some people like an original idea, but you know, chord progressions have been around forever. They've always been the same in a way, but the choice is when to play a note and how you play that note, and that's the difference in music. When people talk about original music, it's what you do with it. It's like putting it all in a blender and seeing what you get. It's like when you start making your own smoothie and you don't know what to put in it, so you throw a thing. Oh, I like it with strawberries. I'll put that in. Or I like it with whatever, and you mix things up, and then you either hate it or you love it. So that's kind of what music's all about for me. I like to combine things, but lately I've been more, because my band's been together for about 13, 14 years, and we did a lot of traveling, a lot of touring, went to Europe, but our stuff was, even though, because I really love playing it, although I was working on other things on the side, I loved playing rockabilly, but I also love playing my own personal stuff that was just solo stuff, but in the outlet to play the rockabilly I was writing was this band. Luckily we had enough culture that was way into that sort of stuff as far as like the rockabilly culture in certain big cities in Europe, that we were able to do these festivals and play these shows and get kind of, you know, well known as far as that genre, and kind of be in the same level as some of our favorite modern neo rockabilly bands, you know. And that went on for years, and now we're just kind of all settling down and not traveling as much, and you know, and so I've got more time to work on more of my personal stuff, more of my solo stuff, which I'm getting more gigs for as well, you know, which I kind of enjoy, but I still play with the other band. But I really love the calmness of actually performing solo. So even though it's more nerve-wracking, it's kind of nervous when people are silent in between songs and you're just kind of, you know, because they're listening to the lyrics, not listening to the song. You have to remember your words. You're not playing rock and roll where you can kind of mumble if you forget, you know.
Yeah. So that brings us to our next question. Who gave you your first guitar, and do you remember what kind it was?
My older sister actually was dabbling in it, and my dad bought her one really cheap secondhand guitar, and I'd sit it on my lap and play it like little kids would, you know, they just play it like a lap steel or something.
Yeah.
But I discovered I had rhythm,